All right, we are here. We are getting ready to get started. I am going to share my screen. We're going to go through a presentation today, and I will introduce myself, but we're going to go through a presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining and for watching the recording. If you're watching it later, we do have a lot of people here, although you may not be able to see the participants in the Zoom meeting, which is okay. So you should only be able to see me and yourself, which is fine if you're live. If you're watching the recording, you may only be able to see one person as we're recording, and that's okay. But we have a great turnout today. We're really excited, and we will provide our information at the end of the webinar for you to contact us specifically with your questions via email, via social media, via our website. So that way we can communicate one-on-one and be able to answer all the questions that you have. So I am going to get my presentation open, and then I'm going to be sharing my screen with you. And we're going to get started. I hope everybody's having a great Tuesday, a great lunchtime. All right. So here we are. You should be able to see my screen now. If anybody has any issues, of course, let me know. But right now we should be able to see the screen and see how your immune system and the ability to fight viruses is at your fingertips. So we're going to walk through that today, really understand that we are in control of our own immune system. We are in control of our body's ability to fight, whether it is a virus or bacteria, preventing illnesses, helping to improve illnesses. And most importantly, in things that we see on a day-to-day basis in our practice is fighting autoimmune disease. How can we prevent autoimmune disease? How can we cure or reverse autoimmune disease the same ways that we can fight viruses as well? So Berman Health and Wellness is a functional medicine practice in Naples, Florida, although we do treat individuals virtually as well. So we treat more than just locally in Naples, Florida. We are focusing on treating the individual, focusing on the proper nutrients for their body specifically, not your mom, not your dad, not your that is going to work best for you. We're addressing the healthy overall muscle mass and fat mass for an individual, really making sure that we're getting our body into an optimal range of both healthy mass as far as muscle, healthy mass as far as fat goes. We need to assess our gut health, which definitely influences the immune system. So over 70% of our immune system starts in the gut. Over 90% of serotonin develops in the gut. So serotonin being a hormone that affects our overall well-being, our mind, our mental health, our immune system. So all of that really starts in the gut. We have to get the gut healthy if we want longevity for our body and quality of life. We're looking at vitamin balance, hormone control, and how these things respond to lifestyle, environment, the foods that we're eating, and your medical history specifically. Our goal is to treat problems and not symptoms. We don't want to just mask the symptom, give you a medication, and move on. We actually want to identify, where is this problem coming from? Where in your body are we finding that the symptoms are starting? So let's actually treat the problems and not just the symptoms. I'm Jenny Berman. I'm a physician assistant. I started practicing in functional medicine about 8 years ago, really because I had my own issues. I was struggling with my own autoimmune issues, my own gut health issues, infertility, food sensitivities. A lot was going on at the time, and that's what really got me into functional medicine. I had a great mentor along the way, and since then have been able to start my own practice and help hundreds, if not thousands, actually. So I am a physician assistant. I have a certification in nutrition and in personal training, and we have started Berman Health and Wellness so that we can help that one more individual. So diving on in, we're going to be talking about the immune system a lot today. The immune system is a complex network of cells and proteins that defend our body against infection, against autoimmune disease, bacteria, viruses, regular old colds, all the way up to the COVID-19 virus, the influenza virus, but then also autoimmune diseases. We have two types of the immune system, the innate immune system and the acquired immune system. And so the innate immune system does not require prior exposure to an antigen, whereas the acquired immune system does require that we have prior exposure to an antigen. So for things like when we get the flu vaccine, we're being exposed to that antigen so then we can fight against the flu, versus things like the regular colds that our body generally can fight against. Your skin, the inner linings of the organs and cavities, the white blood cells, organs, and tissues all make up our immune system. And again, I mentioned over 70% of the immune system is actually starting in our gut health and the gut lining. We have immune responses even when there is no threat to the body, which can lead to autoimmune disease. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later on. So let's talk about food. This is a very complex slide. There's a lot going on this slide in general. So I'm going to break it down a little bit for you and say, food and water, as we know, are our primary sources of energy. If we go days without food, days without water, we're not going to survive, because our cells need energy. Some foods are valuable to the immune system, providing maximum fuel and nutrients into our cells, whereas some are very detrimental to our hormones, our organs, our metabolism. Some foods for some individuals are great, and those same foods are not great for other individuals. So when it comes to our bodies, food is very individualized. Some people can consume things like gluten and barley and rye and wheat, whereas other people will have intense autoimmune reactions if they consume those foods. Some individuals can have almond. Almond can be very inflammatory for other people. Same thing with egg or dairy products, or even fish products, chicken, poultry, beef for some people. Some individuals actually have sensitivities to beef, which can stimulate immune responses as well. Digging deeper into food, we have 3 macronutrients: proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. It's really important that the proteins, carbs, and fats are very balanced in our body for our body specifically. I'm going to need a different amount of protein, carbs, and fats than a 5'6" bodybuilder, male bodybuilder is going to need. I'm also going to need different macros than my 63-year-old mother is going to need. So everybody is going to be a little bit different as far as their macronutrient breakdown, but we have to make sure it's balanced to ensure that we are fueling our body appropriately for the energy and the nutrients that it needs. So I want to talk about these macronutrients a little bit more. As you can see in that circle on the side of your screen, that there's a lot of overlap between what foods provide protein, what foods provide carbs, what foods provide fats, and the combination of those foods. So proteins are going to be things like your chicken and turkey breasts, your lean beef, your game meats, your egg whites. Though proteins also contain fats, sometimes a unsaturated fat, which is a healthy fat, sometimes a saturated fat, which is a bad fat. Same things for carbohydrates. Some carbs do provide proteins, some carbs do provide fats, and some fats provide carbs and protein as well. Protein is a building block of amino acids, which is very important for blood sugar stability, repairing the muscles and bones, hormone balance, and really providing energy to our cells. Protein is a long-acting energy source. Our body thrives off of protein. Our muscles can only build off of protein, the building blocks. Carbohydrates are actually sugar molecules. So all carbohydrates, breads, pastas, rice, potatoes, beans, corn, lentils, sweets, donuts, pastries, alcohol, berries, fruit, all of these things actually convert to sugar. They are all carbohydrates, and carbohydrates convert to sugar. The carbs are actually sugar molecules that break down into glucose, which can be a quick-acting energy source for the body, but because it's quick-acting, our blood sugar can spike and fall with the use of carbohydrates. Fats are a source of essential fatty acids that the body does not make itself, and so we have to get them from our foods. And it is very, very important to be able to absorb certain nutrients like vitamins A, D, and E. Fats are a long-acting energy source. Fats are really important for brain development and for energy to the brain. So to talk about these three food groups a little bit more, the three macronutrients a little bit more, we can break proteins down into complete proteins and incomplete proteins. Complete proteins contain all 9 of the essential amino acids, which are important for our enzyme, hormone, and metabolic control. Some types of complete proteins are going to be things like your animal meats, your tofu, your fish, your eggs, your quinoa, your hemp, dairy products, whereas incomplete proteins do not contain all of the essential amino acids, and they are limited to things like nuts, seeds, vegetables, legumes. It's not to say that you shouldn't consume those incomplete proteins, because those incomplete proteins do provide other nutrient sources, but you do not want that to be your sole source of protein, as they are not complete. They're not providing the body all of the energy it needs. Carbohydrates are broken down into complex carbs, which you can consider as the good carbs, and then simple carbs, which are the bad carbs, essentially. And you like my air quotes there. So complex carbs cause less of a blood sugar spike. So they're not going to cause that blood sugar to shoot up and shoot back down, whereas it's going to be a smaller rise or a more gradual rise and fall. These things are your vegetables, your beans, and some of your whole grains. Always pairing your carbohydrate, your complex carbohydrate, with a protein will also help with reducing that blood sugar spike. Simple carbohydrates will cause more of a blood sugar spike and fall. These are going to be your pastries, your flours, your breads, your fruits. Again, the more protein you can pair with these simple carbohydrates, the less of a negative effect it's going to have on your body. However, simple carbs at the end of the day are still not ideal. Fats are broken down into saturated fats and unsaturated fats. So I touched on that just briefly on the last slide. Saturated fats are going to be your unhealthy fats. So your red meats, fried foods, coconut oils, processed oils, which can actually raise our cholesterol values, increase the risk of heart disease, and are not that great for our brain in general. They can increase plaque buildup, which we don't want. Unsaturated fats are the healthy fats, which we definitely need. We need unsaturated healthy fats for our brain. We need them for our good cholesterol. We need them for energy to our cells as well. So the healthy fats are going to be things like your lean animal proteins in fish, your avocado. Some of the nuts and seeds families can actually also provide healthy unsaturated fats. So we've talked a lot about foods and the macronutrients, the proteins, the carbs, the fats, the good carbs, the bad carbs, the good fats, the bad fats. Protein in general is good, but some of them being incomplete proteins. Why is all of this important? And I've already mentioned a couple of times now, and I'm going to say it again, 70% of the immune system is starting in your gut. So we have to talk about food. We have to talk about your gut. So let's get into the gut lining now. If you look at this this pattern that I have here, if we're consuming a poor diet and it's leading to suboptimal nutritional status, meaning we're not absorbing the right nutrients, or we're increasing the amount of inflammatory foods that we're consuming into our system, we're actually breaking down our gut lining. So if we're eating these foods that our body in general is sensitive to, or we're eating these foods that are very high in sugar, which is inflammatory, it is breaking down our gut lining. We have little structures in our intestines that help with absorbing nutrients, moving nutrients through, and keeping nutrients into the gut rather than allowing the toxins to get out into our bloodstream. If we're consuming the high inflammatory foods or the high sugary foods, which are also inflammatory, we're breaking down that gut lining. Now we're allowing particles and bacteria to pass through our gut lining and penetrate into our tissues, which is causing the immune system to work at a heightened state. It's not normal to have toxins penetrating your tissues. It's not normal to have bacteria getting into your blood to where the immune system has to start fighting and working against it. And this eventually wears your immune system out. It compromises your immune system. We get tired. We are not absorbing our nutrients as well, which is leading to things like poor sleep, higher cortisol levels, vitamin deficiencies, chronic stress on our immune system, and eventually this is going to increase our risk of infection. Other outside components definitely play a role. So pollution in the air, smoking cigarettes certainly is going to impact the immune system as well. Sleep deprivation, if we're not sleeping enough because our blood sugar is unstable or because we're not absorbing the vital nutrients to balance our vitamin levels to be able to sleep at night and to get rest, this can also impact the immune system as well. Alcohol, the chemical makeup of alcohol actually impacts our cortisol levels, and we will talk about, but cortisol is extremely important to stabilize the immune system and the blood sugar. So let's talk a little bit more about something called comorbidities, which also play into our immune system. Things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, diabetes, vitamin deficiencies, medications. These are all impacted by our gut health and our food as well. So if we have high blood pressure or high cholesterol, likely coming from a food source or an inflammatory response within our system. Obesity and diabetes, prediabetes, many times this comes from an unstable blood sugar. We're not able to stabilize our glucose levels because we're not consuming enough protein. We're having too many carbs or sugar in our diet because our hormones are imbalanced or we have deficiencies in our vitamins. Our blood sugar levels are unstable. And again, this comes back to we're not absorbing our nutrients properly because of the foods we're eating or because of our gut health. Certain medications are going to impact the immune system as well. But why are we taking those medicines in the first place? Likely to help with a gut health or autoimmune issue. So again, we have to come back to treating the problem and not just the symptom. So our whole primary goal at Berman Health and Wellness is that we're treating the problems, not the symptoms, and we focus on a nutritional standpoint. So looking at your gut, diving deep, figuring out what foods are best for your body specifically, though we can start to make some generalizations based off the amount of people that we've helped, and really be able to talk about certain foods that influence our immune system as a whole. So that's what we're going to dive into now. We're really talking about how your immune system is at your fingertips, what you're touching and putting in your mouth. All right, so we're going to talk about the 5 most common inflammatory foods, specifically when it comes to autoimmune disease and fighting infections. There are 2 more that I'm going to add in after I talk about these top 5. So let's go through and talk about the different families we have here. Gluten being wheat, barley, rye, malt, and then gluten itself. Dairy being cow's milk products, so A1, A2, casein, whey, and lactose. A lot of people will say, well, I'm lactose intolerant, so I have lactate milk. Well, that's great. You're having lactate milk, which doesn't have lactose, but lactate milk still contains these other variables of cow's milk. So it has A1 and A2 enzymes in it, which your body is still reacting to if you're sensitive to dairy in general. Soy or soybeans, corn, like corn syrup and maize, which you would be shocked to know how many things have corn syrup in them. And then egg is very commonly inflammatory as well. Egg whites and egg yolks. Egg is poultry, it is not dairy. Now, some of the 2 other ones that I was going to throw in that are pretty common to cause an inflammatory type reaction in a lot of individuals is almond and yeast. That could be baker's yeast or brewer's yeast. And unfortunately, yeast is in many things that come in a package. And then almond is very common as well. So these are the top 5, and then we have the almond and the yeast that I've added on as numbers 6 and 7. With all that being said, we have to focus on what foods are right for our bodies specifically, but sugar is one of the biggest culprits to inflammation, comorbidities, and gut inflammation. I've already said a couple times in this webinar that sugar is inflammatory. Sugar is also a laxative, so it can cause loose stool for a lot of people. Sugar is something that impacts our cortisol levels, our ability to absorb vitamin D, magnesium, B12. Sugar affects our melatonin levels, so not being able to fall asleep and stay asleep through the night, which is also an effect of our cortisol level being abnormal. Sugar is inflammatory to the brain, so it can actually increase our risk of mental health disorder, anxiety, and depression. And with that being said, because sugar is inflammatory, when we consume high states of sugar and have unstable blood sugar levels, our immune system gets worn out and we have less of an ability to fight against autoimmune disease and infection. So again, I have some of the carbohydrates listed there that you can see, even things like your macchiato in the morning or your cappuccino in the morning, your latte, which is full of sugar and calories, unfortunately. Things like fruit, fruit is healthy. It is healthy. It provides antioxidants. However, at the end of the day, it's still a sugar. And so too much of a good thing is not a good thing, number one. But number two, we also have to make sure we are pairing the fruit in the right way within the day to make sure we're actually putting protein with our fruit to help with decreasing the sugar spike that the fruit is causing. And if you didn't know, a cup of fat-free milk, so skim fat-free milk, 1 cup has 13 grams of sugar. So that's like having a quarter of a soda just from a cup of milk. What you think is healthy isn't always. So talking about some sugars that can lead to leaky gut syndrome. So let me just throw in here, we've talked a lot about gut health, and I talked earlier about how the gut lining gets broken down and allows particles and toxins to pass through and penetrate into our tissues and into the bloodstream. That is actually the process of leaky gut syndrome. Leaky gut syndrome can lead to things like diarrhea, constipation, migraines, eczema, psoriasis, blood sugar instability, diabetes, mental health disorders, arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid disease. Leaky gut syndrome is the start to your autoimmune disease, most commonly. And so if we're talking about things that can lead to leaky gut syndrome, we've already talked about the inflammatory foods, gluten, dairy, corn, soy, egg, almond, yeast. For your body specifically, not everybody is sensitive to those foods, but we have to figure it out for you. But also sugars. We talked a lot about sugars being inflammatory. So these are some of the most common. Alcohol. The actual chemical makeup of alcohol increases our cortisol level, and cortisol can break down our gut lining. So it's not necessarily the sugar of the alcohol, which isn't great either, but even with these low carb, low sugar alcohols like the Trulies or the seltzer drinks, they don't have a lot of sugar in them, but still the chemical makeup of the alcohol is affecting our gut lining. Caffeine very much can affect our gut lining. GMOs, so genetically modified organisms. So this comes from your processed foods, your packaged foods. Artificial sweeteners, aspartame. I hate it. Diet soda, Crystal Light. You think putting Crystal Light in your drink is healthy because you're not drinking soda. It has aspartame in it. And aspartame actually can spike our sugar just like regular sugar can, but it is also very inflammatory. High fructose corn syrup, we've already talked about. Trans hydrogenated fats, sweets, flours, so any of the white flours, the pastries, preservatives. So you really have to be careful about what comes in a bag and how long it can sit in your closet. If it can sit in your closet for 3 months, it's probably not good for you. That's why, I don't know if you've ever tried it, but gluten-free bread, if you leave it on your countertop, it's going to go bad in 24 to 48 hours. That's why we have to freeze gluten-free bread, because it doesn't have the preservatives and dyes. We know for sure that Food dyes can impact children's brains, increase the risk of ADD, ADHD, night terrors, behavioral issues. And, it's just because it's so inflammatory. So basically, to kind of pull all this together, we've already talked about how sugar increased glucose levels. And when we have more circulating glucose, we're going to store more sugar, which is going to actually lead to this breakdown of gut permeability. With that also being said, when we store sugar, it most commonly turns to fat and abdominal fat, which is going to affect your weight as well. So the inflammatory foods differ for everyone. I've mentioned which foods are most commonly the inflammatory foods, but we have to really figure out which foods are inflammatory for your body. Not everyone is going to be affected by all 7 of those foods. You may only be affected by 1 or by 2 or 3. It may be something totally different, like beef or cod, which wasn't even on those top 7. So, I talked about how the gut lining gets broken down, the toxins pass through, the bacteria gets into our bloodstream, and this is foreign to our immune system, which means the immune system has to start reacting. It has to start developing what we call antibodies, which are inflammatory markers that go and attack our other organs. These antibodies are the actual problem when it comes to autoimmune disease. The antibodies attack our thyroid and cause Hashimoto's, our skin and cause the eczema, our brain and cause the migraines. These are the inflammatory responses. And meanwhile, the immune system is just working and working and working on overdrive, but it gets tired. It wears out. And this is what decreases the ability to actually fight off viruses and bacteria, number 1. But number 2, we often will end up down a road where we're taking immunosuppressants to control our autoimmune disease, which is also going to affect our immune system. You can see here on this picture, on the left side of the picture, this is what a normal gut looks like as far as the structures being closed tight and being able to pass food through the intestinal tract, being able to absorb through these little finger-like structures, your nutrients. Versus when we have leaky gut, they actually open up and break down. So we're now not able to absorb as much nutrients through those structures, and it's actually the toxins are passing through. So when we have leaky gut syndrome and gut permeability, where the particles are passing through, it actually decreases the amount of healthy bacteria that we can keep inside of the gut. And when we have that imbalance of low healthy bacteria and high bad bacteria, or even if there's not a ton of bad bacteria in there, but we have low good bacteria, we just don't have a good balance or a good environment for absorbing our nutrients. So the things that can cause the low good bacteria in the gut, besides the gut permeability, are medications, sugar and inflammatory foods, food sensitivities, environmental factors, so pollution or outside factors as far as like stress can also be a component as well. If we don't have that good bacteria, this is where we are unable to develop or hold on to the enzymes that we need to fight viruses. We are actually more susceptible to certain viruses because we're lacking certain nutrients, certain vitamins. We have more severe symptoms and prolonged post-viral syndromes because, again, we're not able to get our nutrient levels back to where they should be. We're not able to absorb certain vitamins like magnesium that we need to fight viruses, like a histamine response that we need to be able to fight. All right, so we've already kind of touched on this, but where these comorbidities are coming in and affecting our gut health and overall our immune system. So just touching on these again, reiterating that your overall health is going to be impacted from the foods that you're consuming to the gut lining to causing these comorbidities to your ability to fight viruses. Again, the poor gut health and plus these comorbidities are decreasing the good bacteria, increasing the bad bacteria, allowing the bacteria to get into the tissues in the bloodstream, stimulating this inflammatory response, and down-regulating our nutrient levels. So we're actually not absorbing these proper nutrients that our immune system and our cells need on a day-to-day basis. All right, so what can we do to actually improve our immune system, to reduce the effects of autoimmune disease, to reverse autoimmune disease or prevent autoimmune disease? How can we help with our weight management, which is going to improve our ability to fight viruses or autoimmune disease? How can we improve our immune system with the foods that we're eating and with our own two hands? We have to find the proper foods for your body. And I've mentioned that multiple times already, that not everybody is sensitive to the same food. So how do you figure it out for your body? It's a blood test. It's a blood test that we do in our office. It's called a food sensitivity test. So there's a difference between food sensitivities and food allergies. And I haven't talked about that yet. But these are two different immunoglobulins or immune markers. We have IgG, which are sensitivities. We have IgE, which are allergies. Sensitivities and allergies can have very similar responses. You can have someone that has a terrible rash or GI, loose stool, abdominal pain, bloating with a sensitivity, but yet they don't have any reaction to when they consume their allergen. So sometimes the symptoms that we're feeling from sensitivities can be just as bad or worse as the symptoms of an actual allergy. So we need to be looking at both. A lot of times when you have skin testing done where the immunologist will mark up your skin, they're just looking for IgE allergies. They're not actually looking deep into IgG sensitivities. So we do the blood test, which actually detects antibody levels or those inflammatory marker levels based off the foods that we're looking at. And it's going to look at the IgG antibodies and the IgE antibodies. So we're going to see sensitivity versus allergy. The blood test that we use looks at 184 different foods. So breaking down each category into very specific food types and really looking from 184 different foods, which foods are good for you specifically, which foods are not so great for you, and which foods should absolutely be avoided based on your sensitivity results. We want to ensure proper vitamin levels. So do some blood tests and look at your vitamin levels. Look at your B12. Look at your red blood cell magnesium. Look at vitamin D. Check a ferritin level, which is your iron storage level, and tells us a pretty good idea of how healthy your gut is, because iron is absorbed through the small bowel. So if our gut is unhealthy, we're not going to absorb B12 or iron very well. So looking at a ferritin level. Look at your cortisol level, which we're going to talk a little bit more about as well. So we have to look at these blood tests and really look a little bit deeper into your body. These are not tests that are commonly ordered by a primary care physician. They're commonly not done on your annual physical exam. So we have to be an advocate for our health and really look deeper into your blood. Focus on blood sugar stability. So not only looking at your fasting glucose in the morning, your doctor will look at that and say, oh, you're fine, you don't have diabetes, but really looking deeper into blood sugar stability. How stable is your blood sugar on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute basis? And what's actually causing your blood sugar to be unstable? Most of the time, majority of us are not getting enough protein in our diet. So our carbohydrate to protein ratio is not adequate for our body, specifically with our amount of fat mass or muscle mass. So we have to make sure we're getting adequate lean proteins in our diet with lower carbs and sugar to really balance our blood sugar. We want to focus on the proper gut health balance. So are we getting the right amino acids? Are we getting enough glutamine, which is an amino acid that aids in gut recovery or regenerating that gut lining on a daily basis? Are we getting the right branched chain amino acids, which are 3 essential amino acids that we have to consume? Are we getting the nutrients that we need to support a healthy gut lining? We have to move our body 30 minutes a day. So, you hear that for caloric balance, right? Calories in, calories out. But really, the oxygen that we get to our cells is very important for the body's ability to regenerate cells and to keep our cells healthy. We need the oxygen to our cells that we get through exercise, number one. But number two, exercise releases endorphins and serotonin, which is really important for our mental health and immune system. Stress and cortisol control. So I mentioned checking a cortisol level. This is a blood test or a urine test that can be done. And I've already mentioned, if you recall a few slides ago, that cortisol itself is a stress hormone that can actually break down our gut lining. So if we have a lot of exogenous stress, outside stressors, family, friends, money, work, all these things are stressful, but also internal stress. So consuming foods that are stressful on our body, fighting with autoimmune disease, consuming a lot of sugar, consuming alcohol, all of these things internally can cause our cortisol levels to rise as well. Again, you may not be able to control your cortisol level very well if you're lacking certain amino acids like L-theanine. L-theanine is a natural amino acid that helps with calming the stress receptor in our brain, which then tells our adrenal glands not to release so much cortisol. The other thing is, again, sugar. Every time our insulin and our blood sugar spikes, it spikes our cortisol level. So really being able to control our stress, exogenous and endogenous, so inside and outside our body, but also focusing on blood sugar stability to help control cortisol levels as well. Cortisol being one of the most familiar stress hormone in our body, cortisol impacts our hunger, our satiety, being satiated, our sugar craving. So if we have a high cortisol level, we'll most commonly crave sugar. Is very common to affect our sleep. So if our cortisol level is abnormal, we have a difficult time falling asleep, staying asleep, and with our energy the next day. So how Berman Health and Wellness can help you. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar and really learning about your immune system. And I hope it triggers you to really be interested in figuring out what foods are going to be best for your body, number one. So what not only foods out of your gluten, dairy, poultry, fruits, veggies, spices, all of those things that are going to show up on your sensitivity test, but really digging deep into what should your macronutrients be, meaning your proteins, your carbs, your fats for your body specifically. And the macronutrient breakout is going to be set up based off of your activity level, how much muscle mass you have in your body, how much fat mass you have in your body, how sedentary or active you are, your medical history, the medications that you're taking, how much water you're consuming. All of these things play into what your macronutrients should be for your body to either balance you or to reach the goals that you want to reach, and make sure that you're fueling your body specifically. We have a body composition scale in our office that actually looks at fat mass, fat-free mass, muscle, bone, organ. So again, we can see how much of those things do you have specifically, and how do we need to fuel your body. So with doing an initial consultation at Berman Health and Wellness, we can really understand your goals, your specific medical history, the symptoms that you're struggling with at this point, and where you want to be, and really come from an objective standpoint of what's going on internally in your body. Doing the body composition and the scale at the initial consultation, ordering the blood testing to evaluate your vitamin levels, your cortisol, your ferritin, your cholesterol, your thyroid, and seeing how well all of these things are functioning, and potentially doing food sensitivity testing, which is that blood test. Then from there, taking all these results of the medical history, the body comp, the lab testing, we're able to determine a proper supplement regimen if needed. Not everybody needs supplements, and vitamin replacement if needed, along with the proper macronutrients to get you set up on the right path. Again, we're going after the problem. Let's look deeper into your body specifically and see why you're struggling with these viruses, with low immune system, with fatigue, with poor sleep, with autoimmune disease. and work one-on-one with our team, with our nutrition expert and our medical experts, our physician assistants, to really work through your body specifically. We do offer personalized meal plans, gut healing, and hormone balancing to help reach your goals. The whole point of this is to add quality years to your life. What can you do now? If you do not plan on dying in the next 1 year, which I hope you don't, what can you do today to improve your overall quality of life for the next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road? Every day that you allow to go by without making a change and really digging deeper into your problems is one more day that you're going to have to fight. So that's my 2 cents. So you can scan here. This is a metabolic questionnaire. If you look at, if you scan this and take the questionnaire, it actually helps with identifying some of the risks that you have for autoimmune disease, metabolic disease, inflammation. So I'll certainly give you a chance to scan this, but again, this will be recorded and sent out as well. Once you take this, you can actually email us with the results, and we'll help you to kind of understand what the results mean and what might be the best decision for you moving forward. And as I mentioned, please feel free to reach out to us and inquire about your questions specifically. Our phone number, our website, Instagram and Facebook is there. My email is Jenny, Jenni, at BermanWellness.com. So email me, Jenny at BermanWellness.com. Make sure it's Jenni. And ask me about your questions specifically. Tell me what you thought of this webinar. Was it helpful for you? What questions do you have? Take the metabolic questionnaire and send me the results to that email. And we are really excited to help you guys along the way. So I really appreciate everyone that joined today. Again, you weren't able to see all the participants, but we are happy to have everyone here. And we're excited to send this out to even more people. If you thought this could be helpful for someone else that you know, so a family member, a friend, when you get the recording, please pass it along, email it out to them, and let us help one more person. That is our primary goal, adding quality years to your life. So thank you again for joining, and we look forward to meeting everyone.